Welcome to the Great Black and White Shootout. So for this comparison, I tried to keep things as scientifically accurate as I could. So we are going to be shooting Kodak Tri-X on the Canon AE1 with a 50mm lens. We're going to be shooting Kentmere on the Fujica AX3. That one is unfortunately on a 55mm lens, so it's going to be a little bit different framing. And last, we have Ilford HP5 being shot in the Nikon F4, again with a 50mm lens. And what I did with these shots is I metered everything based off of the Nikon F4 because it has a matrix metering system and it's really accurate. So I took the first shot with the Nikon, based all of my settings for the next shots off of the Nikon. So all of the settings are the same. The focal length is the same apart from the 55mm lens on the Fujica. All the settings are exactly the same. I tried to have the exact same framing for all of these shots. So hopefully this is a really good comparison to see how similar or maybe how drastically different these three black and white film stocks are. Okay, so let's take a look at our first image. Over here on the left, we have Kodak TriX400. In the middle, we have Ilford HP5, and over here on the right is the Kentmere Pan 400. So as you can tell, these are all very similar in framing. The only difference is that the Kentmere is going to be just a little bit tighter because it's on a 55mm lens. But again, all of the settings are exactly the same based off of the metering from the Nikon, which is here. This is the Nikon. This is the Canon over here on the left, and this is the Fujica AX3. So the first thing I'm noticing is that it looks like the Fujica's shadows are a little bit brighter than the shadows on the Tri-X or the HP5. Tri-X definitely has the darkest, and the Nikon has the mid for the shadows. I think we're definitely getting more contrast out of the Tri-X. We're definitely getting a little bit more fade over on the Kentmere, and the skies in both the Kentmere and the HP5 look a little bit gray, whereas the sky over here on the Tri-X is a little bit brighter. I think the winner on this one is going to go to the Tri-X on this. I like the way that the Tri-X looks best. This photo of the best dog in the world, my boy Sirius. Kentmere is definitely the most faded. I think we have the same amount of contrast in the HP5 and the Tri-X. But I think I like the way that the HP5 is rendering a little bit more than I like the way the Tri-X is rendering. I'm going to give this win to the HP5. Oh, I love this image from Koreatown of the Radio Korea building. And look here on the Kentmere, this one's definitely the darkest. The Tri-X is definitely the brightest, and this one is the most neutral. I think the highlights are getting a little bit blown out here, whereas on the HP5, I think they're staying, so I'm going to give this one to the HP5. Okay, this image from the park, looking at a baseball field with the mountains in the background. I think we're getting the most detail on the HP5, really good detail on the Kodak, and a lot more faded on the Kentmere. The grass is definitely darkest here, and the grass looks pretty similar between the Kodak and the Kentmere. I'm going to give this one to the HP5. Alright, this image of what I think is the Wilton building. It's really dark down here on the Kentmere as well as here. It's definitely a lot better exposed on the HP5 and the Kodak. I like the sky the best on the Kodak. I'm not sure what this little streak is here. This sky is pretty grungy. So I'm actually going to give this one, I think this one wins. I think we're going to give that to the Kodak. If you've watched my channel at all, you know I absolutely love dumpsters, and I always have to shoot dumpsters, and I love seeing how similar these ones are. But again, we have more shadow detail on the Kodak, probably the least amount of shadow detail on the Kentmere, and so I'm going to give this win to the Kodak. I think that one looks really good. There's not much to say about this one here.
I really like this image. I think it looks really good. I think this kind of looks like a weird little face thing kind of going on. And so it's definitely brighter here over on the Kodak. The Kentmere seems to be the darkest and the grungiest for sure. The Ilford is probably like the best image, you know, in terms of what it captured, but I think I like the Kodak the most on this one. I like the brightness of it, even though, again, these were shot at the exact same settings. Looking at these images from the actual contrast and light and darkness of it, I really like that we're getting some haze or fade here on the Kentmere, whereas on the HP5, it's a lot starker. You get a touch of haze here on the Tri-X, but nowhere near the amount of haze that you get on the Kentmere. HP5 is definitely the darkest. This one, wow, look at the dirtiness of the concrete here, whereas here on the concrete and here on the concrete, it's a lot softer. This has a lot of texture really going on in it. I don't dislike it. If I'm going to just pick which image I like the most out of just looking at the film stock itself, again, I think it's going to HP5. I really do like this Tri-X image over here just because I love the person back there. I don't like the Kentmere. This one I'm not super happy with. I think it's a little faded out and dull, but I love the contrast of the HP5. I think that one looks really good. If you're learning anything from watching this video, I would love it if you would subscribe to this channel, maybe give this video a like. It really means a lot to me and helps me grow this channel so that I can continue making these videos for you guys. Okay, this image of a flower, and these ones are actually quite different. We have a lot of highlights over here, whereas on the HP5, these are really dark. They're a little bit brighter definitely on the Kentmere, and I love the contrast that the flower is getting here, whereas the flower on both the Kentmere and the Tri-X looks like they're getting a little bit blown out. I think, again, I'm gonna have to give the win to HP5. It's just, I really do like the contrast that it's giving. It's really beautiful. Okay, this image of the car wash, which again has a lovely lens flare from the Fujica AX3. That's a really beautiful lens flare. That's one of the reasons that I absolutely love that lens. Looking at the shadows here, we're definitely losing a lot of data on the HP5 and the Kentmere. We're losing most on the HP5 and a little bit less on the Kentmere. But over here on the Tri-X, we're retaining all of our shadow data, but it looks like, actually no, I'm gonna say no. I think the skies are actually really, really similar. And so we're not losing all that data in the sky, even though this one feels like it's more exposed. It's got a little bit more light in the shadows here, which usually I prefer really dark shadows. But in this case, I think the over darkness of the shadows here on the HP5 and the Kentmere, I think that's a little bit too much, whereas I prefer it over here on the Kodak. So this one, you're getting the win here, Kodak. I think that one looks really good. I don't think Kentmere's gotten any of the wins so far through these images, and I'm really surprised about that because typically when I shoot Kentmere, I really love the images that come out of it. Usually I pick Kentmere over Ilford because A, it's a little bit cheaper, and I just tend to love the images that come out of it. But it's weird to see them when comparing them right next to each other, that I actually do tend to prefer the Ilford HP5 or even the Kodak TriX400. So I don't know, maybe I do actually like Ilford more than I like Kentmere. This is changing my opinion a little bit. Are any of these changing your opinions? What's your favorite black and white film? What's your go-to film stock that you're shooting? Let me know in the comments below. And let me know if there's anything about this comparison that you thought was off or I did incorrectly. I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. Wiener Schnitzel, Wiener Schnitzel. Oh, I mean, do you guys just absolutely love a chili cheese dog from Wiener Schnitzel? Because I know I do. I think they're absolutely delicious. So looking over here on the Tri-X, the road is definitely brighter. It's darker here on the Ilford, and it looks a little bit better on the Kentmere. I like the way the Kentmere looks here. We've got more light here in the building, whereas these buildings on the Kentmere and the Ilford are a little bit darker. We've got a lot of grunge going on here on Ilford. This sky looks really good. This sky probably looks the best. But actually, you know what? Kentmere, woo! Yeah, Kentmere's taking the win. That one, we finally get the win on that one. I think that one looks really good.
Have you guys ever heard of the game Secret Butthole? If you haven't, take a look at these next images, and I think you'll understand what the game is.
Today's secret butthole comes in the form of a tree. In looking at these trees, we definitely have, I think, more detail here in the Kodak and the HP5, whereas the Kentmere, it's a little bit less textured, I think. Honestly, I don't know if I can choose between these ones because they are so close. The shadows here are just a little bit darker on the HP5 than they are on the Tri-X. I think these shadows are falling off a little bit nicer. You know what? I think I'm giving this one to the Kentmere. I like that there's a little bit less detail in the textures over here, but definitely really close on these ones. Okay, this image of the house, these are definitely very different. Look how dark the HP5 is compared to the Kentmere, and the Tri-X is definitely the brightest. And remember, these are shot at the exact same settings. I don't remember the exact settings for this image, but they were all metered off of the same settings from the HP5 shot on the Nikon. I definitely like the Tri-X the most on this one. I like the brightness. This one, yeah, the HP5, it's moody, that's for sure. But I don't love it more than I like the Tri-X. I think the Kentmere is a little bit faded comparatively. This one definitely has the most contrast. That one has the least contrast. This one's neutral. And so definitely gonna have to give the win still here to the Tri-X, even though the contrast is different on these ones over here. I like this one the most. These ones are so similar. They look really, really good. We definitely have some darker shadows on the Ilford. These shadows are brighter. These shadows, honestly, on the Kentmere seem to be falling off a little bit better. I like that they're a little bit more faded. Look at our highlights here. I think I like the highlights most on the Kentmere. I think the Kentmere's looking really good. I like that they give that more hazy feeling to it. So I'm gonna give the win here for the Kentmere. I like this one the best, even though our runner down there is definitely my favorite part of the whole image. So if we could have this runner just come over here, you know, I think I'd like that. This one, there's not enough contrast in that one, so sorry. It's a funny little smiling fence. And honestly, I think we're just gonna have to call this one a wash. There's really no difference between any of these images, so that one, that's a tie. Okay, shooting through the fence at this little hose roller. It's darkest here for the HP5, a little lighter on the Tri-X, and again, I think the Kentmere has the most neutrally balanced, where here on the Tri-X, it's a little bit too bright. This one honestly feels a little bit dirty, but this one kind of feels too bright too. So to be honest, I think this one is going to the Ilford. This image is another one that is very, very close. These are super similar. I think we have a little bit gray in the shadows of the Kentmere, whereas the Tri-X and the Ilford are a lot blacker. Maybe that's just me kind of getting crazy nitpicky, but it's definitely more gray here on the verandas, whereas the Tri-X is brighter as well as the HP5. I think I'm gonna give this win to the Tri-X. I think that one looks the best. Okay, this image of the church is pretty unique to see because, again, remember, these are the exact same settings shot across the board. Everybody had the exact same settings on their camera, and look how much darker the shadows are on the Kentmere and the Ilford, whereas here on the Canon shot on Tri-X, we actually have a lot more detail. The sky is a lot grungier here on the HP5 and the Kentmere as well, whereas the sky on the Tri-X is a lot brighter. So this one is going to the Tri-X. All right, this basketball hoop, it's pretty dark here. The HP5 and the Tri-X look a lot better. We do have more detail in the sky, but I don't like this darkness of the sky here. I like the brightness of the sky here on the Tri-X and on the Ilford a lot more. I think this one, the Tri-X, is going to take the win. I think this grass is the darkest. This one seems to have a lot of texture, and this one's probably the best. I think this one is going to the Ilford. I like the Ilford shot the best. Okay, looking at the truck, my first instinct is that I'm giving this one to the Tri-X. It's a little bit brighter here in the shadows. I think the detail on the truck looks really good. I think the Kentmere is a little bit faded. It's not so crisp and contrasty. The HP5 does look good. It's really good, but I think the darkness here is kind of what's pulling me away from it. I like the brighter image here. So this one goes to the Tri-X. Hello, little froggy. So let's see, which frog do I like the most? I think overall contrast is pretty much identical. Let's see if I can find something in these images to even look at. Honestly, nope, this one's a tie as well.
All of these images are so similar. So if there's any one of these that I give the win to one, or I decide that it's a draw, that you're just like, you know what? No, you're completely way off based on that one, Kevy. Let me know in the comments below and tell me what your opinion is. Give me a timestamp for the image that you're looking at, or just tell me what image you think you're looking at. And then let me know of your opinion, because I'd love to hear your feedback as well about what images you think are looking better on these black and white stocks.
All right, this photo of the mountains. Let's see here. I think I like the sky the most on the Tri-X. We're getting the least amount of detail on the Kentmere. We have really good detail on the HP5. So I'm going to give the win here to the HP5. I think it's got a good sky, good foreground, and really good detail, considering that this was shot on 50 millimeters and that mountain is really far away. So yep, HP5, you get the win. Okay, some bleachers in the park. This one's definitely the brightest. I think the HP5 and the Kentmere have some darker shadows. I think the darker shadows make the image look a little bit better. I think the grass on the Kentmere is a little bit more faded, whereas you have a lot more texture here on the HP5. So I'm gonna give this one to the HP5. All right, this image of the bench, I think is definitely going to the HP5. It's got more contrast here in the background, whereas these ones are a lot brighter. So yeah, this one's going to the HP5. Okay, this shot of the Coors Light box in the alleyway, this one I think is going to go to the Kodak on this one, or possibly the Kentmere. Actually, you know what? I think I like the Kentmere more. I think the Kodak is a little bit too bright here, whereas it retained the data a lot better here. But on the Ilford, it's just too dark. So this one's going to the Kentmere. Somebody lost their baseball hat, and this is where you can really see that Kentmere is a lot more faded, whereas you get a lot more contrast out of Kodak and Ilford. I think I like the Kodak the most on this one. I like that even though typically I would want more darkness over here, kind of like you're getting over here on the Ilford, I think I like the brightness of it a little bit more. So this one's gonna go to the Kodak. Okay, this image of the statue, I'm really happy with how this image came out. I think it's really beautiful. There was some lovely light on the statue, and we can definitely see that, remember, here is HP5 in the middle, here is Kodak Tri-X, and this is Kentmere Pan 400. The Kodak seems to be the most neutrally balanced, whereas the HP5 definitely has more contrast. That's for sure. These shadows over here are definitely a lot darker than the shadows over here, but it still looks like we're retaining all of our highlight data in the image here, so it's not like it was being blown out by being too contrasty. Whereas actually here on the Tri-X, it looks like the whites are a little bit brighter than the HP5. Now looking at the Kentmere, you can tell it is a little bit different framing just because, you know, I kind of was not in the exact same position. But it looks like these shadows here are a little bit darker than the Tri-X over here, but they're not, it's definitely not as bright in the highlight regions of the image. This one I'm gonna give to HP5. I think that one takes the win on this one. I like the contrast and that the highlights are still nice and preserved. Okay, looking through a fence at an abandoned lot. This one, honestly, at first glance, I want to give it to the Kentmere just because I love these little lens flares that camera gives, because it's got a really beautiful lens on it at this point. We can't do that. We can't say that it wins just because it has funny lens flares. We're looking at the film itself. So look at these bushes over here. These are really bright, these are really dark, and these are kind of faded out. You know, I like the brightness a little bit, but I think the darker, kind of moodier texture of it looks a little bit better. I'm gonna have to give this one again to the HP5. I like that image more, even though technically the Tri-X might be a little bit technically a better image, but there's something about the moody nature of this one where you still have a little bit of these highlights in the back that are drawing you in just a little bit. Whereas these highlights feel a little bit faded out to me. The Kentmere seems to be drawing too much into the darkness. I don't see much detail over here. And remember, these are the exact same settings across the board. It's kind of nice to see the difference in exposure levels even when they are shot. You know, this was, if I remember exactly, this one was 1/500 and f/5.6. So these should be, you know, identical. Okay, the image of this building here in LA. Let's see here. I think the sky's a little bit grungy here on the HP5 and a little bit grungy here on the Kodak as well. It's definitely more of a faded image, which we're seeing a lot with the Kentmere. There's definitely a lot less contrast with the Kentmere. I think this one's going to the Kodak. I think this is the best looking image. I like the grays here more than I like the super darks here. These look like they're almost too dark. So yeah, this one's going to the Kodak.
So what are your thoughts on this comparison video? Was this worth even the time that it took to shoot these rolls of film, or was this a complete waste of time and they all look basically the same to you? There was a lot of images that I really had a very difficult time even deciding between any of them because they did look so similar. So let me know down in the comments below if you think that I messed up on a bunch of these images, or if I was completely wrong and you thought that one of the images looked a lot better and I picked your least favorite. Let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching this comparison video between Kodak, Ilford, and Kentmere. Let me know if you have any other film stocks that you'd like me to go out and shoot and do a comparison film on. I've got another one coming out where I compare the difference between Velvia as a film stock and the Velvia film simulation on the Fujifilm X100V. And these ones, I'm really happy with these images. I think they came out really well.